Hey everybody, welcome to another blog workshop. My name is Nikita Fuchs for Aeternity from the wonderful Blog Factory. And after we jumped right into the action in the last two videos, let's step a step back and do some of the basic stuff, you know, those things that your computer science teacher regularly does with you in the first lesson, being looking at the function types, the data types, and most importantly, how do we use them and how do we call them in our smart contracts from the outside world? Go ahead and check it out.
Let's recall. We define our contract by giving it a capitalized name. Next, we define the state record to hold all our contract state variables. Next comes the init function, where we don't forget to initialize all state variables with some data.
But don't forget to indent your code blocks. That also accounts for brackets, by the way.
When a contract is deployed, the init function is ran. Deploying a contract with the SDK works by calling the init method of the contract instance. The rest is done automatically for you under the hood, like so. This of course requires you to have the JavaScript SDK properly set up, which you can either look up in the docs, link in the comments, or use AStudio's code generator feature as seen in the first video.
Awesome. Now you learned how to deploy and initialize your smart contract with the JavaScript SDK. But looking at the examples in the AStudio, you might have noticed that there's actually more to functions. Yeah, I found these.
These keywords are simple but powerful. Entry point functions can be called from outside the contract, basically by anyone, so you better protect them well. Payable means that when calling this function, you are allowed to send along AE with the transaction, like this. The amount is calculated in Ethos, Eternity's smallest subunit. There are library functions in the docs helping you to conveniently convert units too. Sending AE when the function is not marked payable will make the contract call fail. The AE you send along is stored inside the contract, and you can make a transfer AE to another wallet or contract too. Watch out though, contracts need to be marked payable too to be able to receive AE with these simple types of value transactions, not including any function calls. Stateful means that this function is allowed to alter the state variables of your contract. In the last video we saw how that's done utilizing the put function. Dirty pro tip, you can write yourself a helper function for updating variables you use quite often in your code. Last but not least, function declares a function that is callable only from within the contract, thereby making it private, as you might know from other languages. A private function can be stateful too, by the way.
Sophia being a strongly typed language, you might have noticed from the AStudio examples that input parameters and return data from functions needs to be correctly typed. So now let's take a look closer at the most important data types for writing smart contracts in Sophia.
Starting with the simple things. Strings, integers, and booleans should be familiar to you. You define and pass them to your function call just as you would in JavaScript. An address corresponds to a wallet or contract on the Aeternity blockchain. Bits represent zeros and ones. You pass them as an array to your function call. Next is bytes. You basically define how many bytes you need and pass a corresponding array of bytes as strings to your function via the JavaScript SDK. What maps are for, you ask? Maps map data of a certain type to exactly one other piece of data of a certain type. The cool thing in Sophia is that you can have maps both as input and return data for functions, like so. You can even nest maps almost endlessly deep. Isn't that awesome? In the JavaScript SDK, pass a map with unique key value pairs. Records might remind you of objects. The main thing to know about records, though, is that you can have many instances of that record type. The names of their keys are fixed, though, just as the types of their values. When passing a record as a function call parameter using the JavaScript SDK, use an object and always watch out to match the expected key names and their corresponding value types correctly, as the definition in your contract would expect. List is what you might know as arrays. Its entries types need to be all the same though in Sophia. Next comes the tuple.
Tulips?
No, the tuple. Tuples are like lists, but they can hold values of any type. Wherever possible, stick to lists though. In JavaScript, you just pass an array. Next comes hash. It's an equivalent to any 32 bytes and exists for easier usage of Sophia's built-in hash functions. Its sibling is signature, being equivalent to any 64 bytes. You can do cool stuff with these, like verifying if something was originally signed with the private key that corresponds to some address without requiring the private key, of course.
And boy, did I advocate long for this feature. That was quite some stuff right now. Okay, but hold on tight still. There's one more cool thing I want to show you.
The option type. From syntaxes like TypeScript, you might know that parameters may be marked as optional. They may or may not get some value. In Sophia, option integer, for example, means that this data can be either an integer or simply undefined. Before you can work with this integer inside your contract, you need to check first if it's defined at all though. You do that with a switch construct that allows you to check whether it's a specific integer, some integer, or just undefined at all. The switch construct will be a separate topic in an upcoming video, as it is way more powerful than this basic example shows. If you're curious though, you can read it up on the Sophia documentation.
Alright, now that you know all the basics, go ahead and build an awesome smart contract. Alrighty, time to deploy this bad boy. Well, at least it was properly typed. Wow, now you can really brush that dirt off your shoulder. You learned typing like a boss today. If you're interested in more technical content regarding Eternity, then don't forget to like, subscribe, ring the bell, feed your cat, clean up your room, you know, the usual YouTube stuff. Tons of useful links down in the description. We would love to see your work and also your questions, of course, in the Eternity forum. Go ahead, don't be shy, let it fly, ask your questions, and see you around in the next video.
Just pipe tobacco.